We'll start as usual with some meditation.
So first of all, let's take some time to establish a good sitting position. Make any adjustments you need to make to how you're sitting. So that you're firmly planted and able to relax as much as possible while keeping the spine vertical and straight. And just bring awareness into the body and notice where there's any sense of strain or tightness. Make any little adjustments you need to make, maybe moving your shoulders to and fro a little, find the best position for them to settle. Letting the arms fall quite loosely, but a little bit away from the body. Rest the hands on the knees or folded in the lap. The head just tilted slightly forward at the position where there feels least strain on the neck. And as you breathe in and out, allowing the abdomen to move in and out freely. Breathing with the diaphragm. And just letting the breath be in a natural rhythm. A few moments. Relax the muscles of the face, especially the muscles around the eyes and mouth, the jaw, the scalp and temples, neck and shoulders. And just before we settle fully, just take 2 or 3 good deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Just right down into the chest and into the stomach region, breathing right in. Just let all that go, let any tightness go as you breathe out. And then just let the body and mind settle into a very calm, gentle state. Just breathing in and out naturally. Continuing to notice what's going on in the body. So while you're aware of the rise and fall of the breath, also be aware of any physical sensations in different places in the body. sensations of warmth and cold. They feel warm in one part and cold in another. Any sensations of comfort or discomfort, again, you may have both at the same time in different places. Be aware of movement in the body. So as you maintain this general background awareness of whatever is occurring, both in the body and in the mind, in the field of sensations, the five senses, but we bring more focal awareness to the breathing. Just make that the center of your attention. Just experiencing the rhythm of in and out breathing. And each time you breathe out, bringing a little bit more relaxation to the body as well. Again, a little bit closer focus, just following the moment-to-moment sensations of the air passing the entrance to the nose, cool air coming in, momentary pause, and then warmer air leaving the body. Just practicing to maintain the attention on the breath for one complete cycle, all the way in and then all the way out, and then again. And also being aware of how periodically the mind's attention drifts away from the breath as thoughts arise. Just observing how they arise, thoughts of the future and the past, thoughts of oneself and others. Just with a little bit of curiosity, noticing how that process occurs. But each time a thought arises, as soon as you become aware of that, is a reminder to gently bring the attention back to the breathing again. So I'm going to do that for about 5 minutes. So just relax your concentration slightly. It's quite a long session of continuous concentration. So you can just move your body a little bit if you need to. Just re-establish comfortable position. We'll continue meditating a little bit more in a moment. So just let the mind and body settle once again into a sense of stillness. And know that there is more stillness and calm in the mind. And just spend a few minutes simply observing whatever is occurring in the mind and also in the body. So whilst continuing to just keep a general sense of the breath as the center, and come back to that if your mind starts to run away on a train of thought. But rather than focusing very tightly on the breath, just expand the field of awareness slightly to notice more the physical sensations that come and go, and the little bubbles of thought that arise. Any emotional reactions or mental images that come up, inner sounds. You might hear a very quiet, gentle sort of rushing sound, like a very quiet wind, which is the sound of your blood moving through your arteries and veins. Noticing your state of mind. Is it sharp and clear, or is it a bit fuzzy? Is it wide awake and busy, or is it very calm? What is your mood? Are you feeling cheerful, or just tranquil? Or is there any sadness or irritation? Just noticing all these different types of occurrences and feelings and thoughts and emotions as they arise, and watching them to see how they change. If thoughts are coming up, then we just observe them, trying not to get too caught up in a train of thought. And again, just gently relax your concentration and slowly bring the meditation to an end. Thank you. So it's check-in time. Anybody like to offer any reflections or things that arose in the meditation just now? Or do I see Lynn with a question there? Oh, okay. Any comments on that, on either on just that meditation just now or on what's been happening in your daily practice? Looking at the meditation first, but we'll also include what's happening outside of meditation as well. Who'd like to offer some thoughts or got any questions, or just how's it been going? It's been quite a long time now, 3 weeks, isn't it? So be interesting to hear how I've seen one or two of you. I'm going to have to pick on people. I might. I'm going to invite Mel first. Yeah. Because I've seen talk to some of the others. So just tell us how it's been going and how was that meditation, and what's
What's your story?
So I bought the book. So
Okay.
well done, Mel. I think I've read like 1 or 2 chapters, and then I feel like I haven't read it for ages. My practice has been going quite good, really. Apart from today, just then my mind was so active, thinking about things that have gone on today, and I just kept trying to bring it back, and it just kept wandering off.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's it.
Good. Oh, no, I'm pleased to hear that it's going better, and and that you're reading the book. Very good. It is a book to be taken slowly. I mean, there's just a lot on every page, so I think that's something to keep in mind. That it's,
Well, I remembered that you'd said that, and I was really trying to read it slow and intentionally, because sometimes I can read and it's just like, and it's not going in.
yeah.
So yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Okay. So when it is like that, which is, for, I don't know how everybody else, but even for me, it's still quite common that there's a lot goes on in it. As the mind wants to go the way it goes, and it can be quite sort of humbling to the ego, I think. Right now, today I'm not gonna get distracted. I'm not gonna go off on these trains of thoughts. I'm gonna, every time it goes away, I'm gonna bring it back. And then we don't, and that's just seems to be like, that is its nature. It's, it takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of practice. Yeah, somebody was saying actually in one of the other classes that I'm doing in my study of the compassion training, because we're doing actually quite a lot of it is exactly the same. There's quite a lot of training on just mindfulness and just watching the breathing meditation. And it was one of the teachers was saying the other day, what did she say? Anyway, just like, that's just what the mind does. It throws out thoughts one after the other. That's its kind of, it's not its basic nature, because it can do other things, but it's so deeply ingrained in us that all the time throughout the day, the mind is, doing thinking, isn't it? And it's having this little conversation. When we're doing something, we're thinking about what we're doing. When we're not doing anything, we're telling stories to ourselves, isn't it? Just does that all the time. So the question is, can we sort of can we, with a little part of our mind, actually sit back and watch the movie, watch what the mind is doing? Yeah. So it might be being very busy. And sometimes when it is being very busy, I think I've said this before, that if we're trying very hard to sort of, be focused on the breathing, and it's just not working, it may sometimes be better to put more emphasis on this other aspect, which is just the noticing, rather than trying to keep it on one object. If it's not wanting to do that, then it's also very beneficial to just do this.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I think the noticing, like I noticed today when I was listening to a patient on phone, and I should have been really listening. But then I realised my mind had wandered off thinking about something what had happened earlier, and I was aware, and I'm thinking, just get your mind back on and listen to her, because I could see. I was aware that my mind was getting distracted again, thinking about that. And I didn't need to think about that. I needed to be with this woman. She needed someone to listen to her. And I think that happened about 2 or 3 times in conversation. I caught myself like, just get back on and just focus on what she's saying. So I think the noticing is really good, because before I wouldn't have even noticed. I'd have just been on phone and what did you say? I think the noticing is good.
Yeah, thank you, Mel. That is a really great example, actually, you know, of why we do this, you know, what's the value of it? If you're able to notice more that your attention isn't with somebody that, you know, is your kind of, your role at that moment is to be listening to that person. And in fact, whenever we're with somebody, you know, it's always a good idea if someone else is talking that we're listening to them and not listening to the conversation that's going on in our head, because conversations will go on in our head all the time unless we bring some awareness into that, you know, staying with the listening. So if the meditation is helping to notice that more frequently so that you bring your attention back more, that's really exactly the result that we're looking for, you know. Oh, hello. Oh, Lynn's gone and come back. So that's a great example, Lindsay, and it relates to Mel. Sorry, it relates to you know, what I'm going to be speaking about today, because this chapter 2 that I suggested for you to read, I think, well, I think, I mean, I did say after the last class, read the first half of chapter 2, and then I think in a subsequent email I said read the second part as well. And what you've just been talking about illustrates exactly what he's saying there about how the benefits of the meditation relate to the rest of daily life. You know, this clear comprehension that we are aware more through the practice of the meditation of how our attention should be, what our attention should be focused on at any given time in terms of what we're doing and our purpose, and you know, leading our life in the most effective way, getting the results that we need to get in our life. So thank you for that example. That's a really great example of how the meditation's supposed to work. So yeah, it's good motivation to stick with the practice. Thank you, Mel. Somebody else, how's it been going? Maybe Lynn, would you like to share something? Because as I say, I've been speaking one-to-one with some of the other people, but haven't heard from you for a while.
I'm sorry if I missed a bit of the conversation there. I don't know what happened. My internet died.
Oh, yeah.
But from the sounds of what I came into, we were talking about the fit between maintaining a practice and the rest of what goes on in our lives. And I think that's something that I've been very conscious of over the last few weeks. Mm-hmm. You know, I've had a lot of things going on, and although in some ways, you know, lockdown was horrible, during lockdown, because other things stopped, I felt I was very focused on my work at Jamyang and my own Dharma practice. Mm-hmm. And I'm now still trying to maintain my Dharma practice, but juggling it alongside a lot of other things.
Yeah.
You know, this course being one example of that, trying to fit it in with other things. And I guess it's made me aware of both the importance of my meditation, but also of how our meditation reflects what's going on in our life as a whole. You know, that there's a connection between the two.
Yeah.
And I suppose, you know, historically, when I first started meditating, I probably saw it as some kind of an escape from daily life. But in fact, you know, the two very much work together. At least that's how it seems to me at the moment. I don't know if that sounds like I'm rambling.
Okay. No, not at all. That's really very much on point. I mean, you know, this chapter, as I said, is about the relationship between the two. That's one of the things I think is why I, you know, one of the reasons I admire this book so much is that he explains that relationship very clearly, and just, you know, how and why meditation is important. Actually, I think if you just read this chapter, you'd probably have to conclude that it's a mistake to not meditate. Because if we want to we want our lives to go the way that we want them to go, which we do, we have to have this kind of clear awareness and this clear comprehension, which I'm going to talk about, in a minute. But the formal practice is very different from anything that we do in the rest of our lives, isn't it? I mean, just trying to, keep your attention continuously on the sensations of the breath. We never do anything like that outside of meditation. But why do we do it? Because it develops certain mental qualities, mental powers that we need in the rest of our life. For our life to be purposeful and for to create the results that we want to create in terms of our own well-being and succeeding in the things that we want to do and doing things that are more beneficial. Without that, without mindful awareness, we will not achieve that. So, actually, I think the message is that meditation isn't really optional. If we want our lives to be the way that we want them to be, then we need to do it. Or we need to train our minds in awareness in some kind of fairly methodical way anyway, whether it's this type of meditation or some other training. But we do need to do some, methodical practice to train our mind. Yeah. Anything else?
Not from me, I don't think, at the moment.
Okay. Anyone else like to offer any thoughts or questions or just how it's been going? If not, I will continue. I just want to check in on the... Oh, we've got 2 pairs of buddies here, haven't we? That's right. And Lynn, you haven't got one, but you're not really kind of... you can, Lynn, if you want to, have a one-to-one session at any time, just let me know. Okay. But yeah, otherwise, yeah. Have you been meeting up, you guys? I think you have. Is that true? Yeah, good for you. Okay. Mel and Daniel, have you been getting together? No. Okay. Well, I'm encouraging you to do it, and I'm sure you understand, the reason why. It's apart from that it's beneficial for your practice, and it's very helpful to talk with somebody. I mean, I do my best not to sort of be the teacher up on the throne, but nevertheless, there's always that kind of slightly different relationship with somebody that is in the class with you rather than the teacher, So I think that's good, but also it's helpful for the group. I think we get more from the process as we get a bit closer and get to know each other better as a group. So I do encourage you to do your weekly get-togethers if you can. And I know sometimes life just might be getting the better of us, too busy. I'm experiencing that a bit myself at the moment, so I understand. But just a bit of encouragement to do that. Okay, so I shall talk a little bit about these 2 topics. And I'll begin with a confession, actually, because I have been extremely busy. So I did prepare, but it was 2 weeks ago. Was thinking that I would have time to just quickly revise it today, but I haven't had because of all sorts of things have been going on. So, but anyway, I will just review the point a little bit. So the chapter the title is Mindfulness and Clear Comprehension. Okay. But actually, those 2 sections, the first one has a different title. So the first part is the title is Bare Attention. So this is the form of mindfulness that we are practicing in the meditation. So they're not actually synonymous. Mindfulness is broader than just bare attention. But in our daily sitting meditation practice or walking meditation practice that we designate as meditation, so it's called formal meditation just in that, that's all it means. It doesn't mean anything more than we've set aside that time as meditation time rather than anything else, right? That's our formal meditation. So we can do informal meditation at any time. You know, we can, okay, you know, I've got some free attention, and we just bring the practice into the moment, you know, at any point. But the formal meditation, so like whether we might do 20 minutes sitting in the morning, or we might do a walking meditation, you know, around the garden as I do sometimes. That is where we are training in mindfulness, but we're applying that mindfulness throughout our life. Okay. And when we do that training, the specific training that we're doing is in bare attention, which is simply noticing what is present. Okay. So more specifically, and we'll talk about that next time, it's, you know, these 4 objects of mindfulness: the body, the feelings, consciousness, and the contents of the mind. And those are the 4 domains of mindfulness, if you like. So all the time there are things going on in all of those 4 domains. And most of the time we're unaware of most of it, right? You know, and as I say, particularly I think in our culture, but generally as human beings, where our attention is focused mainly is in the stream of verbal thinking that is going on, isn't it? You know, there are times when there isn't that interior monologue going on. Like if you're driving your car and suddenly, you know, there's a very challenging, dangerous situation, you won't probably be talking to yourself. You know, you'll be concentrating on what you're doing with the steering wheel and the brakes, and the conversation will start up again, you know, at double speed as soon as you're back in safety again. But most of the time, it is that inner conversation that is going on. And the difficulty with that is that it's, from the point of view of bare attention, is that it's a self-perpetuating process, isn't it? It's like a locomotive. It's going, the wheels are turning, and it's just churning out more thoughts. The story is spinning itself. And so we get engrossed and immersed in that. And it is quite difficult to stand back and watch it. And if we do consciously like do the exercise of watching the breathing, then insensibly, imperceptibly, this little voice starts chattering away, doesn't it? And at first we don't notice it because it's very quiet. And then if we don't intervene and nip it in the bud, it gets louder until we've completely lost the object of the meditation. And like Mel was saying, you know, we have completely lost whatever else we might be supposed to be paying attention to if it's listening to somebody else. I think this is one of the biggest areas, isn't it? Because listening is so important. And the mind works by this association method, doesn't it? So somebody is talking and you're listening to them, and they mention something, and it associates in your mind with something that's happened to you or something else that, you know, one word triggers off another word, which triggers off a whole sentence, which triggers off a whole story, just like that. So yeah, how do we, as he, Nyanaponicus talking about this constant stream of thoughts that is present and is conditioning our experience of everything. That's the other point here, is that, being immersed in this world of thinking, we're constantly making judgments about things and forming opinions. And inevitably, I mean, we have to do that. But we carry those thoughts and those opinions and impressions with us often without any critical evaluation of them. So, prejudice is a good example. People have prejudice because they've not really thought about, an impression that's been made. So they've had a slightly negative experience with an Asian person, for example, and then that becomes their image of Asian people. And then they have, that's they have that judgment as an example, So everything that we encounter, we generally don't see it kind of nakedly as it is, as if we would seen it for the first time and never seen anything of the kind before, right? We already have a whole store of impressions and thoughts and judgments about it that obscure the object itself. And not that, making judgments or having opinions is a bad thing in itself, but it's when they are not examined, they can cause problems. So, I mean, that's particularly the case with our emotions and our motivations. Actually, often, if I stop and ask myself in the middle of the day, why am I doing this? Whatever I'm doing at that moment, I may realize I don't know, it's just part of my automatic program that has been created through different causes over time. So, as he says, this training in bare attention, just noticing, observing in an almost clinical, almost scientific way what is going on in the mind, especially. Also, it also applies to external things as well, that, we can bring fresh awareness to them. A lot of the time we don't notice the things in our environment at all. And when we do notice them, we notice them, with a preconceived idea of what they are, rather than, I mean, I the last one's gone now, but I have a rose in my garden, and I do my mindful walks around the garden, and every time I come past the rose, I stop and look, and smell the rose. But if I'm not doing that quite consciously and mindfully, then I will pass it by without noticing what it is. I mean, it's a miracle, it's an absolutely amazing, beautiful thing that is miraculous. But most of the time, I have no awareness of its real nature. Yeah, it's only when I can allow that object to confront my mind without the mental filter of my preconceived ideas about it, that I can really experience it. And the same is very true, isn't it, for people, that, as Mel was saying, actually really listening to someone. We suddenly, I mean, you've all experienced it, right? But we don't do it that much of the time, probably most of us, we listen, but when you're really listening to someone, you have a completely new experience of that person, don't you? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Suddenly there's that connection, that communication, which is quite different from the usual sort of fairly automatic kind of conversations that we have. It's a much richer quality of connection that we have when our mind is really open, and we're not having that, our own interior monologue isn't going on. So we're actually, through this bare attention, through continually reminding ourselves and asking us, am I awake? Am I in the present moment? Am I experiencing what's going on right now? Rather than just daydream my way through it, then we are, this word enlightenment, this original Sanskrit or Pali word, and now people are increasingly translating it as awakening, because that is the literal meaning of the original word, is like waking up. And it is like that, isn't it? There's being really asleep and, actually dreaming. Then there's being in our usual waking state. And then there's being really awake. And it's different. And so that is, what we are trying to accustom our minds to, in Tibetan meditation. The word for meditation means to familiarize, to become familiar, to make that our customary way of being, to be fully conscious, fully aware.
But I would try and do that, like if I think about like years ago, I never took notice of like the flowers, the birds, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So now I notice things and things, or even if I'm sat there, I'll notice flowers, or I'll think, but then there's that judging as well. Like, I don't know, I can't help but
sure,
just see the things and accept the things. So I'm trying to be aware that they're there, but then I'm aware that there's judging, like, or not even judging, I don't know, just not accepting, just seeing, oh, there's a flower.
of course, no. Yeah. It's a,
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a gradual training. It takes a lot of time, because that habit of, it's really just conceptualizing. Just, we put a concept on it, we put a label on it, don't we? That's a rose, and then we don't need to think about it. and that keeps happening. It will keep happening, and we break through into being fully awake occasionally, and then this kind of it's the left and right brain, isn't it? I don't know if I've talked about that before in this class, but the left brain is the conceptual mind, basically, is kind of linked to the left hemisphere of the brain, and the right side of the brain is the one that artists use. They are able to activate that side of it. Normally, in our society anyway, like at any given time, that there are these two completely different sides of the brain, left and right cortical hemispheres, and in our society, at any given time, one of them is dominant and the other one is in the background. So this left conceptual hemisphere is in the foreground most of the time for most of us. If you're an artist, then you're much more familiar with that mode of consciousness where the right hemisphere is dominant, and you're very receptive, you're very wide awake to what's going on. You're not having so much structured thought, you're not talking to yourself. It's the left hemisphere is the more verbal side. Anyway, so in meditation, that's one of the things that we're doing, is we're learning to activate the right side of the brain more, where we have that kind of direct awareness of things, rather than an awareness that's mediated by a concept, an idea. Yeah. If any, by the way, if any of you are particularly interested in that left brain, right brain thing, there was a quite remarkable book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. You know that one, Stuart? Yeah, yeah. It's by somebody who's an art teacher, and she was fascinated by the fact that, you know, why does the world seem to be divided into people who can draw and really can draw, and people who absolutely can't draw? There's not very much in between territory, you know, seems to be either one or the other. And one day on an inspiration, you know, she was getting students to copy a drawing, and she turned it upside down so that people couldn't really see what it was. So if you can see, when you can see what it is, what happens, she discovered this, and she did much further research, but apparently, you know, we internalize a concept of things. So when you're 5 or 6, you learn how to draw a house, and you learn how to draw a person, like a stick person, you know, and then that becomes your internalized concept of a person. So if you ask to draw it, you know, people who have this block about drawing, they will reproduce the drawing that they made when they were 5 or 6 years old, because they can't get into that direct perception mode with where the right brain is in control. The right brain is the much more visual side of the brain. Artists have somehow managed to, you know, keep that, because we all have it when we're young, when we're kind of like, you know, up to the age of 5 or 6, and then the conceptual mind kind of categorizes everything. And those preconceived ideas are overlaid onto our experience. I didn't mean to talk about this to such length, because he doesn't mention it in here, but this is, you know, in one aspect of what's going on here. So we're training ourselves to bring that, you know, that living awareness back to life. Yeah. And so we do that in our formal meditation with practicing bare awareness. And it's not easy to do, because the habit of thinking is so strong. But anyway, yeah, so that's to bare attention is with one side of it. That's the training. And then clear comprehension, if you like, is putting into practice the results of the bare attention training. So we do the focusing on the breathing exercise every day in order really to, you could say, well, it has an inherent value in itself as well. You know, the actual state of awareness in meditation is itself, to some extent, the goal. But it also, the other reason for doing it is because in the rest of our life, we need this clear comprehension, right? So it is actually still mindfulness, okay? And the main one, I think, you know, in terms of sort of daily life, is this first. There's 4 types of clear comprehension. And I think it's the same term in the Tibetan tradition. I think this is, I'm hesitating there actually. In the Tibetan tradition, like you said, you know, there's this compound term, mindfulness and clear comprehension, in the Pali, sati sampajana. And in Tibetan, or in the Tibetan tradition, there's the compound term mindfulness and discriminating alertness. And I think it's possibly the same term, but I'm hesitating a bit there. I think it is. So this mental factor of clear comprehension or discriminating alertness is what it evaluates how our mind is operating. Yeah. So it's the check that, you know, it's kind of comes in every so often, monitoring how we're doing, you know. So in terms of the actual meditation practice, it's, you know, that alertness or clear comprehension is noticing whether we are meditating mindfully, if you like, you know, whether we are kind of our state of mind is in accordance with what we're aiming for. And again, in daily life, and here especially this first one, clear comprehension of purpose, it's like, you know, noticing whether what I'm doing is in alignment with my purpose. So first of all, you know, I may have an immediate purpose, like I don't know, I want to make the dinner. Yeah. So, you know, is what I'm doing in accordance with that purpose? Is this, am I kind of, does what I'm doing right now make sense in terms of that purpose? But then also whether that action, I'm making the dinner, I probably need to eat, you know, but a lot of the time there's a question to be asked, or we need to be recognize whether or not the activity that we're engaged in is lined up with our general purpose in life. And have we got that right? Yeah. Yeah. So it arises partly as a natural byproduct of the formal meditation training. Yeah. But it is, of course, something that we need to bring attention to as well, consciously during the day. Yeah, really, the first two, the clear comprehension of purpose and the clear comprehension of suitability. That, you know, the way that he explains it is that, you know, the means that we're using to get the result that we want, is that suitable? Does the objective, is our purpose, our goal, is it suitable in terms of we have the capacity to do it and things like that? Yeah. So rather than kind of, you know, running off after this or that, activity that we think seems like a good idea, but really checking, does it line up with who I am, what I'm trying to achieve more generally in my life, and so on. And then the last two, the clear comprehension of the domain of meditation, clear comprehension of reality, these are more within the formal meditation itself. So yeah, so this one, clear comprehension of the domain of meditation. It's interesting here actually, because, you know, he says, well, in the commentary it says, it's explained as not abandoning the subject of meditation. Now it says during one's daily routine. Okay, so this is actually right. Yes, that's right. So that's very important, actually. What this is saying is, you know, although it's in the formal meditation session that we are principally, you know, training our mind in this case, bare attention. But outside of the meditation session, as we're going through our day, there should be like a background awareness of that. So if we were, if we were training in compassion, then it would be quite important to think about compassion as we're going through our day, as well as doing a structured meditation on it, 1 or 2 sessions during the day. Of course, more so if we're on a retreat. Yeah. So even though we may have some time when we're not in formal meditation, we would still want to bring the subject of the retreat into the between sessions. Everything other than a meditation is called a meditation break. So the rest of your life is just a break from meditation. That's the way it's talked about in Buddhism. Kind of stands it on its head, doesn't it? Usually you think meditation is a break from the rest of life, but okay, so but in that case, we wouldn't be able to be thinking about compassion all the time. Yeah, as we're going through all kinds of normal activities. And he says, then you should, the subject of meditation should be put down like goods carried on. In other words, put down consciously and then picked up again later. But, he says, if one's meditative practice is all around mindfulness, as advocated here, there will be no need ever to lay aside the subject of meditation, which will in fact include everything. So, yeah. That's not saying that all the time we are practicing bare attention, okay? That we can only practice at particular times. We can't practice that when we're in the middle of busy activity, but we can still practice mindfulness. We can still, whatever we're about to do, make an intention to do that action mindfully. Yeah. And there'll be different ways of doing that in different situations. But that's one part of it, is preparing. So if for instance, if we're going to go into a conversation with somebody, we know it's going to be a bit difficult, then before doing that, if possible, it'd be good to think about, well, what can I do to maintain mindful awareness here, so that, because in that kind of situation, there's a danger of really, if you lose your mindfulness, you may lose control. You might get really upset, angry, but if you bring that recognition there first and say, oh, well, how am I going to operate myself, if you like, in this conversation? What am I going to do to keep my equilibrium? What do I need to remember? Useful thoughts to remember to keep that. How am I going to handle the situation? Then there's much less risk of that. So it's worth reading carefully through this second half here, because there's quite a few useful comments about how to live the rest of one's life mindfully, as well as the formal meditation practice. And the first part of the chapter is, again, is very good, clear explanation of kind of why. Why are we doing this? So in this section on the threefold value of bare attention, that there's 3 things that we're trying to accomplish to get to know our mind, right? So very simply, the Buddha is saying, it's the same as if you're a scientist, you're studying beetles, what are you going to do? You're going to spend a lot of time looking at beetles very carefully, right? Watching what they do. we want to get to know our mind, to understand our mind, we need to spend a lot of time carefully watching our mind and observing how it functions. Very like the attitude of a scientist, and he mentions that, you know. So that's helpful to keep in mind, you know, what is my attitude to my mind in this practice is the attitude of a scientist. Yeah. So not in the, I mean, scientists do different things, you know, they do experiments and they do theories, they create theories and they do mathematics and stuff. But here it's that first part of scientific inquiry is just impartially observing the phenomena, isn't it? Yeah. We're just taking that attitude, right? I'm not going to kind of come with any preconceptions about my mind, like negative or positive judgments about myself. Because if I have a negative or positive judgment about my mind, I pretty much have a negative or positive judgment about myself, because I identify very strongly with my mind usually, which is interesting, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, why? Why do I identify with my mind? I'm not my mind. There's something to think about. But anyway, you know, I do need to understand my mind. I need to get to know it and observe impartially what's going on in it, because often I have very questionable ideas and preconceptions about my own mind. Sometimes quite contradictory ones, you know. Like one time I'm thinking that I've got a very intelligent mind, and another time I'm thinking I've got a very stupid mind. Neither of those things are really true. My mind is just what it is, and sometimes it behaves intelligently, and sometimes it behaves stupidly. But you know, I'm not it, actually. And when we start to look at it, we may find some surprising things. We may find we didn't know our mind as well as we thought we did. And this is the very interesting journey that we're on. So, yeah. I think is it a quotation from the Buddha about knowing the mind? And shaping the mind and liberating the mind. He says that, and I think in the first chapter he talks about that. I'm not sure whether it is from the Buddha or whether it's no, it's his own statement. But yeah, page 23 in my copy, it says, the Buddha message as a doctrine of the mind teaches three things: to know the mind that is so near to us and yet is so unknown, to shape the mind that is so unwieldy and obstinate and yet may turn so pliant, to free the mind that is in bondage all over and yet may win freedom here and now. Okay. So that's kind of, you know, three aspects of the purpose of what we're doing. Yeah. So he says in the second chapter, he says, you know, it is especially mindfulness and then especially bare attention that you know, that gives rise to those results. Okay. So that's the purpose is we want to get to know our mind, to be able to train our mind to operate the way we want it to operate. And as he says, you know, it's very obstinate and you know, recalcitrant and habit bound. How do we make our mind operate the way we want it to operate? And this, he says, this is really the key, is this practice of bare attention through getting to know it, not from a theoretical point of view, but by direct experience. Then we become able to shape it and make it do what we want it to do. And ultimately, do the same process that, that as that knowing of understanding the nature of the mind through direct experience rather than some kind of theoretical knowledge, as that goes deeper and deeper, increasingly the mind becomes free from its self-created prison. So this happened, this happens mainly through the understanding of. So in here, in the Pali tradition, they use the term anatta, non-self, but it's the same, word of selflessness or emptiness in our tradition. So not in our practice, we not only noticing, oh, this is going on, this is a thought, this is the breath, this is a bodily sensation, etc. Not only are we noticing those things, because this is a vipassana practice, as well as noticing that those things are occurring, we're also training progressively to notice their nature of impermanence and emptiness and suffering, dukkha. Okay, these three characteristics that all of those internal phenomena possess. There's a slight difference in the Pali tradition, the Theravada tradition, from the Mahayana tradition. In the Theravada tradition, and we would say, from the Hinayana perspective, or Dalai Lama's told us not to use that term, actually. But in that philosophical view, they say, all impermanent phenomena are necessarily suffering, dukkha. But in the Mahayana, we don't say that. There are, this term dukkha is usually translated as suffering, but it presents difficulties in terms of the Pali tradition view, because actually not all impermanent, you can't really say that all impermanent phenomena are in the nature of suffering. For instance, the mind of an arhat is, is changing moment by moment. But they would say that's dukkha, but the arhat is not experiencing suffering. So, and particularly in the Mahayana, there are many more impermanent phenomena recognized, especially in Vajrayana, in Tantra, that are recognized to be impermanent, but they're not classified as suffering. So there's a slight difference there. But there's still these three characteristics are, in the practice, since we are not, arhats, or we're not, high bodhisattvas or tantric practitioners, we don't really, everything that we experience, because everything that we experience actually is accompanied by self-grasping, the wrong view of inherent existence. Therefore, every moment of our experience is actually an experience of suffering. So here I would say, in terms of the way our tradition understands this term, you can translate dukkha as suffering. And we are, even when there's no manifest suffering, even in high states of samadhi, there is still pervasive suffering, because although we're not experiencing any kind of discomfort or pain, but we're not liberated from suffering. We're going to come down from that state of samadhi. If it's not a state of actual nirvana, if we haven't realized emptiness directly, however blissful and long-lasting we may be having a state of blissful concentration, it's temporary. We're going to come back down again. So it still counts as suffering, because we're kind of, like the beings in the God realms, they're having a great time until, in the desire realm, God realms, they have a wonderful time until a week before they die, and then their body starts to decay, and they manifestly get old. They start to get ugly, and they've been so very, very beautiful and never experienced any pain, and they start to smell, and the other gods won't go anywhere near them because they don't want to think about death, So terrible suffering, but it's that suffering is kind of dormant until that point, isn't it? So in the higher God realms, that doesn't happen, they're just completely blissful all the time. But then the karma runs out and they're back down here again. Yeah, or maybe in the hell realms, So that is, from the Buddha point of view, Buddha thought that's not okay, because he actually trained with these great masters who were able to teach him to reach these very high states where he would have there's rebirth in these very, very high formless God realms. But he recognized that that wasn't what he was after. He was after something more than that, because that's just a temporary respite. It's not really. Anyway, this is a little bit jumping ahead to next term, actually. Back in Lamrim here, aren't we? But anyway, the main point is, as we continue with the practice, we should progressively try to bring that awareness in more, that, we are noticing these phenomena occurring in our mind and in our body, and watching them, but also being aware of the fact that they're impermanent, and the fact that they are, there's no self there. Yeah. So we tend to identify with our thoughts very strongly, and our emotions and our sensations and our body. None of those things is me. That sense of I that I kind of put onto those things is actually an illusion. There's just thoughts and awareness and physical processes going on, and sensations and emotions. This is very deep topic, and we're going to go in a lot more into this in the third term, actually. But it's not something to take on trust, it's just something to look at as a question, rather than, I've made it as a statement, but I would take it as a question, an inquiry, as you're watching your mind and watching your breath and noticing the thoughts and noticing the feelings and everything. Ask yourself that question. Is there some self here, as well as these transient phenomena that are coming and going? Okay. So, got a bit of time for questions and discussion. Any questions or thoughts, or thoughts, feelings, sensations, bodily processes? I probably should put you in breakout rooms then. Maybe I'll do that. Yep. How about, we'd have 15 minutes or so in breakout rooms, and So talk about that. Yeah. Talk about, if you can, what have you noticed in doing this meditation? I'm hoping that at least some of you have been bringing that aspect into it. But just talking about experiencing in whatever way the impermanence of everything that's going on in the mind, the fact that it has a quality of dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. Yeah. You may be more aware of more subtle kinds of discomfort or suffering or whatever, and whether the practice has has an influence on how you think about yourself and your experience of whether there is a self there. Okay, you all right with that? We'll try that. I'm just going to put you in 2 rooms with whoever's okay, here we go. Okay, 15 minutes. Okay, hello everyone. Right. Can we hear briefly from both those groups? Anything that came up that was of interest? I know you've got something to say. You weren't sitting there in silence all that time.
Yeah. I'll say something,
Great,
because
thank you, Lynn.
Mel and I were talking about ultimately about changes that we've made in our lives recently.
Huh?
But there was a connection with mindfulness, because there's a recognition that if we're not clear about exactly what we want to do and why we want to do it, then we can finish up in a situation where we're trying to keep too many balls in the air,
True.
and potentially dilute that effort. Like your analogy about if I'm cooking my dinner, what do I need to do to get there, and is what I'm doing going to be productive? Well, it's kind of that on a bigger scale,
isn't it? Yeah.
If your aim in life is to achieve whatever, I'm trying not to go into great detail about long examples, but why do I need to do this job, or why do I need to keep these things in my home, and those sort of growing awareness around that. Don't know if you want to add anything now.
No, yeah, just talking about that, but being able to let go of things as well, like things what we've been holding on to for years, what we don't even need, or just in case, but actually we don't need it to cook that meal, do we? So let's get rid.
Yeah. So being in flow and seeing life more as an unfolding.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Because Mel was connecting that to impermanence, we think we get our life straight and it's like, oh, I've sorted it now. But in fact, it'll all change again.
It will.
So, we need to be open to that process happening and taking us to a new place, or to see new things, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, it can take a lot of the stress and anxiety out of life as well. Yeah, because we project the negative expectation as well as a positive one, and as a very concrete thing. And so bringing that, just mindful presence into life automatically tunes us into impermanence, I think. We just see it happening. Very good. Yeah, no, I think it's incredibly important, actually, this thing about clear comprehension of purpose, because we can get to the end of our lives and suddenly realize I didn't do what I really wanted to do with my life. And it's only really by bringing that kind of awareness, reflective awareness into life, that we can make those adjustments and realize that, hold on, I'm going in this direction, but really I want to go in that direction. So what can I do to change direction? Yeah. Great, thank you. What about the other group? The quiet group?
Well, we talked about the same kind of thing really, in terms of you know, attributing positives and negatives to things, and in terms of the self, we looked at you know, the absolute and the relative. So absolutely, there may not be a permanent self, but
Yeah,
relatively there is, and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what we talked about.
you think
Anybody else?
relatively there's a permanent self?
Oh, well, I don't know, but I'm getting to the stage in the evening when I start to sort of babble, really. So I may have got that wrong.
Well,
But,
relative-
There is a conventional. We were talking about conventional
Thank
self,
you.
weren't we? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
thanks for rescuing me there,
conventional
Linda.
No,
self
it's
isn't-
okay.
The conventional self isn't permanent, is it?
No.
Is
No.
it? We know that's the textbook correct answer, but it'd be interesting to look in your experience and see what your mind is telling you about it. You know, what
Well,
your experience of
I
it.
know I'm not the same self that I was when I was a child, so it obviously changes. So I know that from personal experience.
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because you know, sometimes I think about things that happened when I was quite a young child, and I do have this very, very strong feeling that happened to me.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
You know, so I think it's actually is quite a deep question.
Mm. It's subtle, isn't it?
Very subtle. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Because I mean, I wouldn't operate now the way that I did then, and I wouldn't have the same beliefs and so on, the same thoughts probably. Nevertheless, when I look back on that
Well-
experience, it's very immediate. You know, that happened to me. I can still kind of, that quality of that experience is still rather quite present to my mind.
Mm. I suppose it's
Well,
because
here's
it's
a case in
your
point,
memory,
though.
isn't it? Go on.
Here's a case in point, though, David. In the morning, if
Yeah.
you ask me that question, I could give you a very concise, very cogent answer.
Yes.
Getting to this time in the evening, my mind is gone. So there you are.
Great. Well, maybe we should have the next meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning then, Stuart.
Well, we'll negotiate on that one, David.
Okay, maybe midday. All right. Yeah. Great. Okay. Or 11 o'clock. Okay. Well, we've come to the end of our time. So yeah, we'll just sort of continue to reflect on that, and I will send. Try and send an email tomorrow. But what it's going to say, I'll tell you what it's going to say. One of the things it's going to say is to read on to the first part of chapter 3. So chapter 3 is the 4 objects of mindfulness, and the first part is mindfulness of the body. And then there's also a section of the sutra related to that. It's the first 5 pages in my copy of the sutra. So read that as well. Okay, so you read those together, they obviously relate to each other. So yeah, the section in chapter 3 on the mindfulness of the body, and the section in the sutra itself up to the end of the contemplation on the body. But I'll say a bit more in the email. So yeah, let's take a moment to dedicate. It's so we can rejoice that we have, you know, it was looking a little bit uncertain, but here we are continuing with this journey. So just bringing mindful awareness to that. Rather than sitting in an armchair watching the TV news or whatever else we might be doing, we've spent some time
seriously looking at how we can develop our mind in the direction of awakening. So we can really take joy in that. Very significant and meaningful. And reinforce the intention for this practice that we've done this evening and whatever we've done the past few weeks, or indeed in our whole lives. The result of all of that practice to be for ourselves, to be able to reach full enlightenment as quickly as possible without any obstacles, in order to be able to free all beings from suffering. So may we all be free from pain and suffering. May we reach the state of full enlightenment. May all beings be free from suffering. May they all reach the state of full enlightenment. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone. See you next week, and we'll
Thank you.
get together
Yeah.
when we can for an extra meeting.
Thanks, David.
Okay, thanks, David.
Night
See
all.
ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
See you all next week. Bye bye.
Bye, Lynn. Bye, Stu.